everyone, welcome back. I hope everyone is okay. Today I want to talk about a text that is actually very personal to me. When I was studying American culture and literature at Hacettepe University, I took a course where we analyzed the Bonesetter's Daughters by Amy Taine. I still remember writing an assignment on this novel, and somehow that experience stayed with me. So today I want to return to it, but this time not as a student, but as someone who has lived with literature a bit longer. What really stayed with me in this novel is the way the narrative shifts in the second half. We began to hear LuLing's voice, her story, her memories, her truth. And what we read is not just a story, but a written testimony she lives for her daughter Ruth. And I think this is where the novel becomes deeply powerful because as readers, we start to understand that identity is not something fixed, it is something inherited, translated, sometimes even misread. Luling's story helps us understand her fears, her beliefs, even her superstitions. Things that might seem irrational at first began to make sense when we see the trauma, the loss, and the cultural memory behind them. For example, the story of Precious Auntie is not just a tragic backstory. It is a turning point, a moment where silence, misunderstanding, and unspoken truth lead to irreversible consequences. The fact that the LuLing ignores the written text her mother leaves behind and only understands it after her death is incredibly striking, right? It makes us think about how often meaning is delayed in human relationships, how often we only understand someone when it is too late. And this is something the novel does very quietly, but very deeply too. Another aspect I find fascinating is the role of writing itself. Writing is not just a form of communication here, it becomes memory, identity, and even survival. Luling's calligraphy, for example, is not just aesthetic, it reflects intention, energy, what she describes almost as a flow of spirit into language. And in a way, this connects to a broader idea in literature that language is never neutral. It always carries history, emotion, and presence. We also see how cultural systems intersect traditional Chinese beliefs, Christianity introduced by missionaries, and later the idea of America as a kind of imagined space. Not necessarily a real place, but almost a symbolic one, like a distant promise or even an illusion. And I think what the novel does so well is that never simplifies these tensions. Instead, it allows them to coexist. Luling believes in ghosts, in fate, in curses, but she also navigates modernity, war, migration. Her identity is layered and sometimes contradictory. And that's exactly what makes it feel real. By the time we reach the final part of the novel, when Ruth reads and finally understands her mother's story, something shifts. Not just in their relationship, but in Ruth herself. Because understanding someone else's past becomes a way of understanding your own. And I think this is one of the most important ideas in the novel, that identity is relational. That we become who we are through the stories we inherit, the stories we resist, and the stories we finally choose to understand. There is also this beautiful line in the novel, quote, "A mother is always the beginning," unquote. And I think that line stays with you because it reminds us that our personal histories are never just individual. They are part of something larger, something continuous. So when I look back at this novel now, I don't just see a text once I analyzed for a class. I see a story about memory, language, silence, and connection. And maybe more importantly, I see how literature allows us to return to text, to ideas, and sometimes even to earlier versions of ourselves, to read them differently. And that, I think, is one of the most meaningful things literature can offer us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!